Great. Well, let's do that then now. Thanks, Shane, for that introduction. Welcome, everyone, to this month's AI study group. This is a sort of a recap of the study group that we had in the Europe, North America time zone last week, but it's also an opportunity to build on that discussion as we have done in the past. Today we have three agenda items, one around the board meeting that happened at the end of June around this study group. We want to provide an update to what the board discussed and said. Then we had a presentation by Laurie Grant, who is from Qualcomm. I will bring up her slides and we can go through them. And then we wanted to talk about next steps around how are we going to take this study group forward and what we want to try and achieve. And here's an opportunity for this group to kind of build on what was discussed in the past. So without further ado, we can hand over to Shane to talk about our favorite slide, the antitrust policy, and then maybe also the board meeting update. Shane?
Excellent. Thank you very much, Matthew. So the antitrust policy notice is shown at the beginning of every meeting we do here in the Linux Foundation. And its purpose is to ensure that we all have a safe and comfortable environment for our discussions. You can find the full antitrust policy notice on the Linux Foundation website. And if you're from an LF member company, you can ask questions of our counsel, Andy Updegrove. If you're from a non-LF member company, of course, you can ask questions of your own counsel as well. With that, over to Matthew, or perhaps over to me to give the board update, depending on your preference.
Yes, please do. Did you say you had a slide, or is it in this deck?
Oh, I do.
Oh, excellent.
No, I've got a slide. I can share it if that's all right.
Please do. I will stop sharing.
Okay. So I'll show you what we showed the board. When we had the board meeting, we took 5 minutes to talk through the AI study group. And the purpose of that was to ensure that when we had a large number of our board members present, we could give them a directed summary of what went on while reminding them of how to check out the last few meetings. Now, the most important point that we raised was a very simple one, that there's potential emerging consensus for developing some form of guide to using AI bill of materials and building trust in the supply chain. Whether we do that or not, the key point is that the problem is being narrowed down. We've gone from talking at the very high level, what is AI compliance in the supply chain as a concept, through to coming to an understanding that at the very least, there is some consensus that some form of bill of material management for AI is necessary so that corporate policy and processes can be applied. And the last meeting, and Matthew will cover this, kind of dug into this topic more. And that meeting was just subsequent to the board. So the last AI meeting happened after the board meeting. So bear in mind that the topic will have continued to evolve since then. The key point for us is that the board was informed of the status in late June, and this emerging consensus, the potential for emerging consensus of making some form of guide, likely around how AI bill of materials can be used in the supply chain. And the board acknowledged that and is ready that if this study group decides to action the development of a guide, it's ready to receive the application from this study group to change into a working group. So in short, we socialize that there's been progress, 6 months of nice work, potential that the study group will decide to make a guide. Most likely that will be somewhere around AI bill of material usage in the supply chain or similar. And therefore the board is briefed on it, ready for the application. And I think I could say that in the board meeting, there was a positive response to what's being done here. Matthew, I hope that's a good overview. And
It
back
is.
to
Thank you,
you.
Shane, for that. And we'll carry on with today's session and maybe the next session with the development of the next steps. And myself and Dave, in conjunction with the rest of the AI study group, will talk about how we move this to a working group and when we're ready to move this to a working group. So let me share my screen again. So we will move on now to the next agenda item, which was from Laurie Grant. I will just interject and say that you can find the recording of our last meeting on YouTube. Here is the link, but you can just simply go to YouTube and say AI Study Group July, and you will come up with the full meeting. But Laurie presented on ISO 4201, and I have her slides here, which we can share around later. Laurie Grant works at Qualcomm, and she's been tasked to implement an AI management system at Qualcomm. And she kind of highlighted the ISO standard ISO 42001, which is used for sort of developing AI management systems. At the last meeting in June, both the Europe America and the Europe Asia meetings, we presented the discussion points around ISO 42001, and various people had read this and had expertise in and presented to the study group. So this was kind of further building on it, because we wanted to hone in on a couple of the areas, or Laurie kind of honed in on a couple of the areas, which is specifically talking about third parties in the supply chain. So ISO 42001, if we just look at this bottom left-hand corner, it really talks about the who, what, when, and why of how AI risk management systems work, and talking about clauses, controls, and implementation guidance. And what is missing, or what we think is missing from this, is the where and how. And this is where OpenChain can possibly help to kind of add an extra layer to this standard and provide further guidance on how we can do it in an open source software world. Just while I've said open source software, we did also touch on in the discussion about commercial versus open source software. This has been a debate from previous AI study group sessions, and there is still an open-ended question around whether we do this just for open source or for commercial, or do we start with open source. So we've kind of kicked that decision further down the line. But what OpenChain can do is provide guidance on what a model card or a data card might look like. It probably won't go into the details of certain fields is required, but it could quite nicely complement something like SPDX or Hugging Face or other AI bill of material projects that are out there, and we can kind of direct people to that, but maybe stating that a model card or a data card would be helpful for the supply chain is what I guess we touched on. Further to this specific area on control, we highlighted 3 different areas, which you can now see on the right-hand side, around allocating responsibilities, working with suppliers, and working with customers, kind of meeting suppliers' needs and customers' needs, going from up and down stream. As I said, we'll post these slides. We didn't actually read through the slides, but Laurie did go through these 3 in a little bit more detail. Again, we didn't read the slides, but when we talked about allocating responsibilities, this is for who in an organization would be responsible for different parts of that AI system lifecycle. And there were 2 clauses which you can sort of see in the middle here, B 6.2.7 and B 8.2, which we come on to the end in a little bit more detail. So this was around allocating responsibilities. The next section was around suppliers. Again, what materials are provided to suppliers that align with the organization's approach to responsible AI systems. And again, you can see in the bottom line that these 2 clauses, B 6.2.7 and B 8.2, keep on cropping up. The third area was for customers, and essentially it's a repeat of the last supplier. Rather than looking upstream, we're now looking downstream at our customers. What sort of things do customers need and want to get the best out of their AI systems? And again, those two additional clauses go into more detail about the sort of things that they can recommend. So let's talk about those two clauses just in more detail. This 6.2.7 highlights that when talking to partners, whether that's upstream or downstream, technical documentation is sort of required. And the specification kind of outlines a list of certain things that may be required, and also recommends putting controls in with that documentation around version control and who can have access. Furthermore, when we talk about users, again, it's the same, what information users are required to have, and then necessary controls around that in terms of who has access to it and who shall determine what information is necessary. So those were the slides presented by Laurie. It kind of, she spent sort of 10 minutes or so going through these slides. They were very helpful, and sort of then we opened it up for discussion. Going back to this slide, Dave Marr kind of highlighted the need for focus on the supply chain, and where OpenChain has had its success in the past is, again, focusing on that supply chain, building trust, and hence we have the previous two standards. And Dave could see a path to something that we could create to help with that supply chain discussion. And then, as I said, we got into a topic of commercial versus open source, and then how granular we want to get into the how. So those were kind of the main discussion points. If you wanted to go into more details, you could, of course, go and listen to the full recording. But I wanted to open it up to this group and this audience to get their thoughts on what has just been presented, and open it up for discussion. Do we think this is something that would be valuable for the supply chain? Kind of going to a little bit more granular detail than ISO 4201, but not going too granular and sort of stepping in where SPDX or Hugging Face have their working groups or their work. And with that, I will open it up for discussion.
I very much think it would be useful. I suppose my slight reticence is that this is such a quickly evolving space that standardization seems possibly a bit optimistic at this stage. But then, of course, I wasn't really paying very close attention to the length of time it took between the discussion starting around the previous standards and them actually emerging. It might be that length of time is sufficiently long that it makes sense to be talking about this now.
You make a good point. Forever evolving, and this is why I'm very keen for us to start on these next steps to see if we can get something down on paper, and we'll come on to talk about that in a minute, just to see if we can help, and if we can sort of formalize or even standardize within some groups, and then maybe there is a snowball effect after that. That's something we can deal with afterwards. But yeah, the thoughts were, let's start getting things down to see if it is even possible to come up with consensus and agreement and standardization. Thanks, Ron.
Yes, I think I would agree with that. And then, sorry, on the other point about commercial versus open source, I will go back and listen to the recording, which I haven't done, I must admit. But I don't necessarily see those as being in enormous tension at this stage because of the immaturity of the sector. In a way, it's like discussing how we do these things openly is bound to be useful for closed implementations as well.
I think I'm in agreement with you there. If you look at what we could do with a model, say a model card, it could, I believe, equally apply to an open source model or a proprietary commercial model. It's, of course, down to an organization to decide for the commercial model what they do with that information. And as we say, it's an immature area, and let's kind of carry on with that mindset of maybe we do both and make a decision further down the line whether we have to hone in as this develops, and as more companies get involved or have a look at it, or the community get involved and review it.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I think care of preparation of metadata for and preservation of precursor materials for models is going to be something people are going to need to concentrate on anyway, because regulation may well demand that. Of course, I mean, not having worked in commercial organizations who are implementing business models around distributing machine learning models, I'm missing kind of strategic aims which they have, which we in the sort of public sector and more open organization don't have. But my naive view is that it ought to be useful for them too.
Thanks for your point, Rowan. Anyone else like to chip in, have a discussion?
I just have an observation that, when I was in China about 2 weeks ago, I noticed that there was a lot of discussion about the new AI products and investment in this domain. And I did notice that awareness of 42001 was quite high. So ensuring that we intersect with this does seem to be important.
Okay.
Shane, good observation. Anyone else? Hearing none, I'm happy to move on to the next agenda item. I'm just going to stop sharing and make sure I've got the right screen. So share again. So this was starting to talk about the next steps. I think after the June meetings, we were getting to a consensus that we might want to start documenting things down. Now, Shane very kindly set up this Google Drive folder that I'm hoping everyone has access to. Certainly everyone in the mailing list has access to it. And it has a scratch pad for us to start capturing information. What I did to create this scratch pad, and I know we've kind of topped and tailed it with some discussion points, is in previous meetings we've looked at ISO 5230, the licensing open chain standard, and we'd said in both meetings, the America, Europe, and Europe, Asia, we'd said some of these clauses in there very helpful to move across. And what I simply did was just move things across to a new document, to this scratchpad area, and maybe change some of the words to make it appropriate. So from licensing to AI bill of materials, and maybe just finesse the English around it. And it's an opportunity for us to review this, see what it looks like. Nothing is set in stone. Nothing is defined. It's all open for discussion. And we didn't actually go into detail last meeting, and maybe we can just go into it in a bit more detail now, for people to go in and reflect on it and say, yes, I do like this. No, I don't like these kind of ideas. I know Shane had put some comments in before then. I don't know if we want to walk through some of those comments, Shane, but it was a bit of a preface of what the document can do, and then we go into the actual document. Was there anything else you wanted to add there, Shane?
Right. So really just to highlight that text is set in the context of what the board expects. And if we were going to go in a different direction, we'd have to be aware that we'd have to re-socialize it with the board. And the purpose of that was just to make sure that as we noodled on this document, people knew where the parameters were without us needing to go back and say to the board, oh, by the way, we're not actually working on AI bill of material management in the supply chain. We're looking at a different scope. So that's what that preface was about. And as long as we stay inside that scope, we play in the sandbox without really needing to worry too much. And I think that's useful. AI is such a big topic. Beyond the fact of ensuring that the board isn't caught by surprise, we could talk about anything. And the preface there is designed to to keep us laser focused on, Matthew, what you said in motion and whatnot. And if people have out of scope comments, then probably it doesn't belong in the conversation, or it belongs in as a side note as opposed to a central item. Yeah, that's all.
Thanks, Shane. We also talked about the ISO standards. Now, the ISO 5230, we have, I would be careful with my words here, we have the rights to, I guess, distribute our version of this text. Clearly, ISO have their own copyrighted version. So anyway, the bottom line is we have access to the licensed text that we had discussed openly previously. The 4201 it is available on ISO for purchase, but we don't have an open version of it. And then we have some of the SPDX versions, which it appears as though, again, we have access to, but not the ISO equivalent of it, which is just a way of saying for some of the standards and some of the text, you can go in and read. The links are on the page. Thank you, Shane, for putting these links in. But as far as I'm aware, we don't have the right to openly disseminate the ISO 4201. So that needs to be purchased separately if you wish. So
very, oh, sorry. I just wanted to, if it's okay, to make a comment on that. That, to be fair to ISO, once it's in the ISO system and they have it there, they have it on their web store and people buy the standards. They're normally about 100 to 200 Swiss francs. ISO has running costs, and there's a very good rationale for them having some way to recoup their overhead. But in the case of the open standards like OpenChain, as Matthew said, we own the copyright for the OpenChain version of the OpenChain standards, and we give a grant of the copyright to Joint Development Foundation, which gives a grant to ISO for their version. Like same with SPDX. So we can get the text for OpenChain and SPDX freely at any time, but not other people's ISO standards.
Thanks, Shane. And then now we get into the actual part of the document that we're going to start working on the Scratchpad and building it up. So I think, did Shane put this link in the chat? Thank you, Shane. Was that a yes? I'm just looking there. I can put it in the chat.
Which one? I put
this document.
No, I haven't. I don't think I've got this one. No, I've got a different thing, capability maturity modeling. So thank you.
So I've just put the link to this document in the chat. We'll share it around afterwards. But this is the section I just briefly want to go into. I think it's an opportunity for us to all go away and review it, add comments, add text to it. But as I said before, heavily inspired by 5230 and taking the text from it. So section 1, as we've kind of all agreed, we should probably have a policy section, and in the 5230 it says a policy shall exist that governs, I think it's something like license compliance, but here we've changed to AI compliance of suppliers, models and systems, and then kind of gone into some points around how we would demonstrate that we have that. I will just go through the headers and then we can open it up for discussion. There's a section on competence. Again, that's in 5230. An organization shall define roles to ensure the relevant people have the relevant skills, and they will document it. Awareness of such policy and demonstration that this has been available within an organization. We talk about the program scope of the model, and that's governed and well defined, and again there's verification proof of that. We now talked about licensing obligations, and I guess this could be open for discussion. Clearly, the 5230 is heavily focused on license obligations, and here it may be relevant to call out as a separate section, or as we may find out from later on as I'll go to it, we might want to bury this in with other sections within the standard, within the guide. But we highlight again that if there are licenses associated with the models data sets or the models themselves, that these are reviewed in a process that would be defined by the company, and we talk about why we do that. And a process shall exist for, I guess, managing the use cases that come in. This looks like a cut and paste. Okay, so that's licensing, and I've kind of highlighted that in yellow because I think that's an area that we probably want to discuss. A few other things that I think are pretty obvious that we can copy across. So have access to, if a partner or customer has any queries, there should be a process for inquiries. Things should be effectively resourced to ensure that, you know, adequate efforts go into developing models, systems, data cards. And here we go. This is then probably the largest new section that's coming about AI bill of materials. And I think the scope of the board was suggesting that we do focus on a guide for AI bill of materials, and kind of highlight here that model details include things like the license of the model, how we deploy it, explain how to stop a model if it's malfunctioning. This may become a necessary part of regulation, ownership, liability, and clearly there's plenty of other things that we can add, and I recommend that we all review it. We might want to also highlight the model's use cases and what's out of scope. Then we talked about data sets. Originally, we'd separated the data sets out to training, testing, validation, and other, but it might just be that we want to genericize it because there are so many different data sets. So we highlight that licenses are available, licenses have been reviewed, what the data set is used for, how it's collected, what the intended purpose of that data set is. And I wanted to highlight, and we touched on this before, other relevant fields that an organization might want to include. No, my apologies, this bit here around, we could define it or format it in a way like the SPDX AI profile or Hugging Face or other software bill of materials related to AI bombs. Next section was around tracking, reviewing, and approving, archiving the collection of all the AI bill of materials. And then I think we were kind of running out of steam. A process exists to examine technical specifications, including architecture, compute, hardware, software. I do want to highlight that I think at the moment, unless the consensus changes, which we're open to, we'd probably take out of scope things like environmental impact, transparency, bias at the moment. That's again open for discussion. And then we've got a load of terms and conditions at the bottom of the document. Then that brings it to an end. So with that, I will go back to the top of the guide. I'll open it up for discussion, and I also see a few things in the chat.
I have one item which is just, I guess, an overview for those parties who might be new. So there's a lot of approaches here, material here, which aligns with ISO 5230, as Matthew pointed out. And as we use this scratch pad, we're whittling down overlaps and thinking of what's potentially missing. And of course, as Matthew said in this call earlier, that doesn't mean we're making a new specification at this point. It means we're taking the meat, the bones, the structure of a specification that we happen to own, and we're looking at overlaps. And from this, hypothetically, we could decide, okay, now we've consolidated things neatly, and we can easily make a guide from this material. So that's just context for people who might have missed the earlier part of this recording or similar. Second note I had, which is towards the end of the document, Matthew, the stuff which you were flagging is probably out of scope, or at this juncture is, though it's open for discussion. Everything is always open for discussion in OpenChain. Yes, out of scope at the moment. Environmental, transparency, bias. As per the very beginning of the document, we're currently keeping the scoping concept, AI bill of materials, in a supply chain. How do you manage that? And with that concept, discussing a broader topic like what are the normative values for measuring environmental impact with AI? What is the transparency required for something like AI in a legal domain such as the European Union? Or what is the consequence or importance of bias? That's way different to talking about how do you deal with an AI bomb in the supply chain. They're all valid topics, and aspects of them may fit into this. We might say that if relevant to your company, you might want to make sure that your AI bomb includes fields that will allow you to decide and to understand what is the environmental impact, transparency, and bias of the AI models or generated AI products that are going through your supply chain. But anyway, I just wanted to highlight that and help set some context there of the thinking of why some stuff is in scope and why some stuff is out of scope. I noticed that Kelvin had a very interesting point. He said, I assume SPDX applies to AI bomb as well. Do the fields in SPDX satisfy everything an AI bomb needs? Matthew, I'm going to hand that over to you mostly, but I'll just make a comment that SPDX is a SBOM format, and the SPDX3 has an AI profile. Does that satisfy everything an AI bomb needs? Depends on the company, depends on the sector, depends on the product. So, we're not normative on bomb formats. We're interested in the process management of them. So for many people, SPDX AI bomb might be exactly what they want. Some people it might be too little, and some people it might be too much. But truly, I think Matthew's the one to comment on that.
Yeah, and I see different layers and SPDX and OpenChain and the ISO 42001 standard being kind of all part of the jigsaw. So ISO 42001 and other standards and other guidance like that is very high level. We are then coming in and proposing guidance around processes of how to manage things. And you will, you should have a possibility to review the licenses for a model. And we could then say, when creating an AI bomb, we should be declaring these. How you declare it is down to you. There is an SPDX format. And this is where I think it's even more granular with SPDX of this is the exact field that we would fill in for a model license and a dataset license. And as Shane highlighted, the SPDX 3 version, the profile does have some fields, and it's being evolved further to the 3.1 release, which may come out later this year, and additional fields may be added. I think we work sort of parallel to them, maybe in conjunction with them. I am on that SPDX profile group. I think others are as well. So I do see the SPDX and OpenChain being different, but we're working closely together to achieve the overall solution, which both OpenChain and SPDX need to be part of.
That's such a good way of putting it. And I mean, given the fact that we're about process management and they're about the implementation, it's just a perfect synchronization, really. But at the same time, people don't have to use both. If we hypothetically make an AI bomb guide, one way to implement it will be with using SPDX and the AI profile. But other bill of materials equally true. And by the same token, someone could use the SPDX AI profiles without making any reference to OpenChain or guides we make, et cetera, et cetera. So I quite like the way that we try to stack the solutions from the high level process management, that's us, to the implementation methodology, that's SPDX. And I think we also synchronize with 42001 as well. They're filling out a different part of the management of AI.
Does anyone else have any other questions or comments on either that point or the Scratchpad? Well, hearing none, that was kind of everything on the agenda today. The recommendation was to take this document and edit it, provide comments. We can share this link around, and we look forward to hearing comments for discussion. And I think next time we will probably walk through this in more detail and review the comments. Does anyone have any final thoughts or final points they want to raise before we close the call?
I would just like to just make a note to those people who were present, who came in. I noticed we had a couple of people dial in from China, and we'll probably have some people pick up the recording. You know, for the people who came on live, you're very welcome. No pressure ever to make a comment, but appreciated that you dial in and you're prepared to engage and contribute. And for those on the recording, likewise, your voice is super important. Dive into the mailing list and so on. Matthew, we have low attendance on the Asia Sync call at this time, in these last 2 calls, but I think there's value in keeping the Asia Sync call moving forward to make sure that people can turn up, can raise a question, and also so that we have this concise 30 minutes to 1 hour summary of the much bigger workshop at the beginning of the month. What do you think?
I agree. I'm certainly happy to continue sort of driving these sessions as long as people are still dialing in and find them useful.
Thank you so much, Matthew. The time you put into this is invaluable.
Thanks, Shane, for your kind words. Well, if that's the case, I'm happy to request or end the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Take care. Have a beautiful day. Bye-bye.
Bye. Safe flight, Shane.
Thank you.